Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today is the moment you've all been waiting for. Part 2 of Infinity War is out. We've got 8 new uniforms, and you want to know, Cynicalex, which uniforms should I purchase? Which ones are the best? So I purchased them all. I've been playing with them for the last 2 days, and I've come up with what I think is a fairly reasonable assessment of all 8 uniforms. Now, for the purposes of a kind of coherent list that you can go back to and refer to, I am going to be ranking these uniforms from best, i.e. number 1, to 8th, i.e. the worst. However, I do want to start by saying that it's unfair, first of all, to compare all of the 7 uniforms in this list that cost 1,050 crystals to the 350 crystal for Doctor Strange. So that's kind of the first thing. The price definitely matters here, and the fact that it costs about a third of the other uniforms is a big deal, both in favor of its value to purchase, but also in what we should expect from it. We can't expect a huge top to bottom rework for a character that was already very strong with a uniform that's already 80% discounted. Additionally, I did have difficulty putting this list together, and I do want to caution you that while some uniforms you may disagree with, I do think that all of these uniforms are good. Unlike the last update where we had a clear winner in Winter Soldier, taking a hero from 0 to absolutely monstrous, completely impacting the meta in a big way, almost to the point of, Alliance Tournament and stuff like that, I don't think, at least right now, that any of these uniforms are going to have as much of an impact. While we may see some of these characters like Ebony Maw or Scarlet Witch in Alliance Tournament, Scarlet Witch was already a very powerful character. She was already seeing a lot of play in Alliance Tournament, and Ebony Maw not so much, but he's probably the closest thing we have to an unused character being pulled into a very relevant place in the game. But rather than any one character kind of exploding onto the scene with a uniform, we just have a solid group of 8 very good uniforms that are strong, that address the character's needs, and that are actually, believe it or not, surprisingly balanced and not too overpowered. Which, if you ask me, yes, I think Winter Soldier's uniform went a little bit, not too far, but it is kind of OP, and that's nice, and we like that. But if we had that again this update and every update from now on, it would start to get out of control after a while with too many of these kind of OP characters. So just keep that in mind. So coming in at number 8 is going to be Black Dwarf's Cull Obsidian uniform. Now keep in mind that the character got a pretty sizable rework, not only to his skills, all 5 skills changed, but also to his Blind Rage tier 2 passive. So if you don't get his uniform, it actually hurts the character even more, because he doesn't get any benefits from this last update. The character's unchanged without his uniform. But with his uniform, he gets a huge top to bottom change. The biggest change I've seen is that he has even more damage, and he was already pretty tanky before. He gets even tankier, but he was also pretty good for dealing damage, and it's only getting better. The biggest change for him is his third skill, Wheel of Cull, which is giving him the damage accumulation, the kind of Sharon Rogers effect. So you're going to want to level up this skill to 6 as fast as you can, as long as you have the gold and you want him to succeed, because it's going to give him a maximum of 4% attack per HP taken in damage, true damage, which basically equates to a maximum of a 60% all attack buff, which is pretty nice for 6 seconds, or for 10 seconds, in addition to a 30% buff that he can get. So he can get almost 100% all attack buff in certain circumstances. The reason why I rate this one at number 8 is that although it does a lot for the character, it doesn't give him any of the meta breaking or meta defining traits. He doesn't have a revive, he doesn't have a super OP kind of continuous heal, he doesn't have iframe ignore, and he doesn't have penetration. So missing all of those factors, he doesn't have reflect either, does still limit his usability. In addition, he does have a very curious new effect where if you cast his third skill, it completely changes the animation and the attack speed of his first and second skills. It's a bit wild, you'll have to check it out in skill preview, but it basically makes him teleport with Axe Lunge and Executioner, and he looks like a Dragon Ball Z character just popping up in front of you and behind you and just punching you back and forth and juggling you. Now, that's a really cool skill to use when you can control the character, like in Shadowland, but I don't know how well that's going to translate into autoplay if Cull Obsidian is going to use his third skill and then do that 1-2, 1-2, 1-2 combo, or whether he's just going to use his third skill and then go about his regular business doing his fourth skill and his fifth skill. Fourth skill and fifth skill are great, don't get me wrong, good AoE and good damage, but if he's not taking advantage of those extra perks that his design offers him, then it does hurt the overall value of the character a little bit, especially for autoplay modes like Alliance Conquest, etc. Coming in at number 7 on the list, Doctor Strange's new uniform. And I put this one at number 7 just because it's kind of in a weird place. I don't really think it deserves to be on this list at all because, like I said, it's unfair to compare a 1050 uniform to a 350 uniform. We've never seen a uniform this cheap. I mean, this is like less than a week's worth of crystals for a free-to-play player in this uniform. And there are some changes, but it's very few. Most of his skills remain exactly the same. There's some slight changes to the animation on his first skill in addition to the stun plus bind. There are quite a substantial number of changes to his fourth skill, which I've been told does alter his skill rotation. It's no longer 5 3-2 3-2 3-2. It's something more like 5 4-3-2 4-3-2 4-3-2, which is pretty cool to see. But other than that, he doesn't get any substantial changes to his skill effects. He gets a change in his reflect, which instead of doing 40% now deals 50% damage received, which is a 10% difference. Not too noticeable, but it might kill enemies slightly faster. And then his heal on his second skill, Demons of Denak, will heal for 10% instead of 8%. So some very minor tweaks. The biggest change you'll see for Doctor Strange is that this uniform will give him a larger stat bump once it's mythic. Rather than being at 20% mythic, it'll be at 25. So he gets an extra 5% all attack, an extra 5% all defense. He does lose the lengthy iframe on his fourth skill. The new fourth skill iframe is much shorter and it takes a long time to wind up. So that does leave him a little bit more vulnerable in autoplay situations. But I do think it's still an amazing offer in terms of the cost, and I would still purchase it despite the fact that I've put it personally at number 7 because it's just difficult to place both value and power-wise with the rest of these uniforms. Moving on to number 6, I think Hulkbuster's uniform is pretty interesting, not to mention the zipper on the top of his head. This uniform is actually very good defensively. I don't think it's as good offensively as some people were hoping for, so I do think that if you're working on Hulkbuster, you should rank and kind of gear out the rest of his kit to be offensive if you want to use him in PvE modes. If you just want to use him in PvP, you know, Alliance, Conquest, stuff like that, then I would go full tank, because I think he can be really annoying and he can survive for a really long time. And that is thanks, in fact, to his first and second skill are pretty straightforward. They do have AoE or crowd control abilities, but they're really nothing much to compare or to look at. But 3, 4, and 5 are his kind of bread and butter. His third skill has a very long iframe, and it's on a 8-second cooldown. So that's a 4-second cooldown at 50%. With only, you know, it's about 2.5 to 3 seconds of iframe. So you only have about a second gap to spam this skill to do something else. So it's very, very good defensively, and the damage is not bad. His fourth skill gives him an 8-second guard hit, so this is very easy to put in between either before or after the third skill to protect him. And then his fifth skill moves him away from the enemy, and it also gives him a 6% heal. So between 3, 4, and 5, which you can basically cycle between comfortably if you have max skill cooldown, he gets a very long iframe, he gets a guard hit, and he gets a heal. That basically makes him untouchable for stuff like Shadowland, for stuff like World Boss Ultimate, unless there's an iframe pierce mechanic from something like Proxima. So it makes him very, very tanky. The damage, however, is not going to be as substantial as some other characters that you've seen. It's not going to match up to War Machine or Rocket or Star-Lord, so you will have to compensate for that. But I do think it's a very good defensive uniform for this character, and it complements his defensive nature rather than making him kind of a one-trick pony with the iframe, with the 5-4, 5 cancel 4 damage proc that he used to be known for. Moving on to number 5, we have Star-Lord's new uniform, and I actually really like this uniform. I wanted to put it higher on the list, but I just had other priorities. Visually, I think this uniform is the best one they've ever made for Star-Lord. It just looks really nice. Even though he's wearing the mask, it just looks so cool. The hair coming out. And the skills, I have to say, are very, very cool. His first skill didn't change at all. That's fine. His second skill is still an iframe. It looks cool. His third skill is absolutely amazing. Long iframe, amazing damage, and you also see Doctor Strange. You know I can't say no to that. His fourth skill, great AoE. Again, great damage, long iframe. So 3 and 4 are beautiful. 3 is on a 3-second cooldown at max 50%, so you can just spam the third skill all day long. It's fantastic. You could almost do 3, 3, 3, 3 if you have a very low attack speed. And then his fifth skill, they actually did change it. They added a lot more AoE, a lot more damage, and now you can cancel the skill very early on. As soon as you see I was informed by a Twitch viewer. As soon as you see the shadow of the Milano from Star-Lord putting on his headphones, you can cancel into 4 or 3, and you will still get all those kind of AoE blasts. So he kind of plays like Yondu, where you cancel that 5th skill after he points and you see the lasers come down, and you can continue throwing the Yaku or the Yaka arrows to kind of spam and kind of fill up the field with all of your different attacks. So you can basically spam 543, 543, and it just looks amazing. The screen gets obliterated with damage, and everybody dies. And it just pairs really well with his ignore dodge, his guaranteed crit rate, crit damage, and he does a lot more damage now than ever before. Not as much as some of the other guys left on this list, but I think Star-Lord users will be very happy with his place in the game now. Definitely not a slouch in terms of DPS anymore. He does lose an iframe though, or he loses the length of an iframe, the duration, so he's a little bit more vulnerable to damage, but that's okay because he puts out a lot more damage now. Moving on to number 4, with Star-Lord being at number 5. Number 4, we have Rocket Raccoon, and I was a little bit hesitant on where to put him on this list. He does have some good and bad things to this new uniform. For some reason, Netmarble is just in love with the kind of mine, the throwable mine skill for Rocket, so they've decided to keep that one. I don't like this skill, but I guess it's good for Shadowland because of the 3-second paralyze. However, he does have a really nice new feature on his passive. They changed his passive. When you use his second skill, it'll give him a 5 guard hit for 3 seconds. So anytime you're in trouble, just spam that 2 skill. I know it says covering fire, but they mean to say boom. It's just a typo. So he has basically an auto guard hit on his second skill whenever you use it, which is nice. His 4th skill, long iframe, does good damage. And his 5th skill, amazing damage, huge AoE. He's got the burn, he's got explosives, he's got guns. Groot comes out, and he gives himself a nice boost, an all attack, all defense, all speed boost. So if you haven't rolled an ISO 8 set yet for Rocket, try to roll Overdrive because he doesn't need the attack speed. However, the other big kind of, not big, but the other negative for this uniform is that it doesn't have a heal anymore. They completely removed the heal. They replaced the heal with, like I said, the auto guard hit and a 6-second immunity, which is kind of long like Shuri's, which is amazing. So he's very tanky, and he also, not tanky, but he has a lot of survivability now, and he deals massive damage. However, without the heal, any kind of max HP recovery rate obelisk that you might have given him won't have nearly as much synergy unless it had a heal component to it, like a CTP of refinement, but that wouldn't be very good. So some people might be stressing or sweating having to unequip or replace those obelisks for Rocket now that they don't synergize anymore. But very good damage, and definitely Rocket was in a worse place than Star-Lord from the beginning, so this uniform does bring him, I would say, about to Star-Lord's level, maybe a little bit higher. So it's definitely a greater overall jump for him, which is why I put him slightly ahead of Star-Lord. Moving on to number 3, we have one of the more expensive now in terms of the overall cost of upgrading uniforms, and we're talking about Ebony Maw. This one is a pretty substantial change for the character, not only in terms of the looks, but also in terms of the skills. Gets a lot of revamped skill animations, a lot of them coming from the movie, or kind of movie-esque in terms of like the wisps and the darkness and the shadows. He's got a 10-second mind control ability, which, as I'm told, it works with World Boss Ultimate and most PvE modes, which makes him incredibly powerful if you're just trying to stall for time. It doesn't do a lot of damage per se, but it allows you to kind of lock down the boss for a long time. His summons are now on his 4th skill, and they just linger for a long time. The damage is not that good, but you do want to upgrade the skill. It got changed from his 3rd skill, which is why mine is maxed out here and not maxed out here. But they last for a long time, and it's kind of hard to notice. It almost looks like the skill effect because the shadows keep kind of roaming around, but those are actually the summons going around and dealing damage. But the real kind of charm of Ebony Maw now is his new 5th skill. In addition to the meteors, he summons a giant meteor a la, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it just rolls around the screen. It actually bounces around the screen if it reaches a corner or an edge. So it's really nice, and you can actually skill cancel a lot of Ebony's attacks, kind of like Apocalypse, to just shower the screen with basically 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So test it out. It does amazing damage, and of course I can't ignore the new, it's not the passive, it's his new effect with his uniform, where he applies to all allies, and I got it wrong in the patch notes, so I'll correct myself, everybody on the team will get damage reduced from universal types and damage increased to universal types. So that's extremely meta for World Boss Ultimate, because as we know, all of the bosses right now are universals. All of the Thanos and his children are universal. We only have the few kind of X-Men related ones on the other side of the World Boss splash screen that aren't universal. So this is very, very important, and it's also important for the Frost Beast, which is also typed as a universal for ABX. So very powerful uniform. Probably will see some place in the meta, either as a support or as a kind of hybrid support DPS or support crowd control type of character, especially in teams of 3. Moving on to second place, we have Scarlet Witch's uniform. Now this is a very, very good uniform for a character that didn't necessarily need one to stay relevant, but lo and behold, she used one. A lot of the changes to her skills are actually quite strong. The one that people are going to complain the most about, I think, is her second skill, because it's no longer an iframe. She kind of just backs up and summons or pulls kind of earth out of the ground and throws it at the enemy, that she does in Infinity War to Proxima and Corvus. That skill, while it does great damage and it tracks the enemy very well, does leave her vulnerable. So I think now more than ever she needs guard break immunity. And I think going back, I should have mentioned Rocket Raccoon probably needs guard break immunity as well. Additionally, she got boosts, a huge boost to her third skill. It's now got a channeling component, so it's a very powerful skill to end your combos on, especially if you're trying to hit a damage proc obelisk. You can cancel her fifth skill and get the meteors. You can cancel her fourth skill, which is very similar to Nova's fifth. She just kind of charges up and releases this kind of energy presence that kind of just pulses around the field and has a large AoE. So 4 and 5 deal massive damage. 4 especially deals insane DPS. So definitely open with that if you don't open with the fifth skill, and then end with the third skill. 1 and 2 are pretty good. 1 is exactly the same, so 2 is basically the only one that you may want to skip from now on, but a very powerful effect. She's got an additional damage reduction coming for both physical and energy, so she's going to be harder to kill. The only thing she lost overall, besides the iframe on the second skill, is the clones. She no longer has the summons to help her out, to take a little bit of the aggro away from her, so I think that makes her a little bit more vulnerable, but the additional stats and the additional reflect do make her overall harder to kill, I think. But that leaves us with one more character, and of course, as you all know, if you're paying attention at all, that would be War Machine, number 1. I was a bit hesitant to put him at number 1 on this list, but I knew I had to put a character here who got the most from their uniform possible, because I think that's in essence what we're trying to see from these uniforms. Taking a hero that's already extremely powerful and giving them a uniform that makes them even more dominant is nice, but it doesn't really capture the essence. Uniforms are supposed to be kind of a huge transformation, taking a caterpillar and turning them into a butterfly, like Winter Soldier. And I think War Machine is the closest to that we've seen. He was missing damage, he was missing survivability, he was basically missing it all. And while a lot of his skills are still missing text, which is kind of how we gauge the power effect of them, you know, the immunity, the ignore dodge, the ignore iframes, the buffs, he's still missing some of those things, but he's got a lot more now in terms of damage. He's got iframes on a lot of his skills, and he's got huge DPS. His fifth skill and his fourth skill, or third skill especially, deal insane damage. And even though I had mythicked Rocket Raccoon's uniform, I found that War Machine was just out DPSing everybody else in all of the tests that I ran. He was out DPSing Star-Lord's 50% leadership, out DPSing Rocket, definitely out DPSing his larger brother in Hulkbuster, and just tearing through enemies. And the iframes coupled with the massive AoE definitely make him a very fun character and a very powerful character for PvE. I don't think that this uniform is going to put him in any way, shape, or form into the meta for PvP content. So please keep in mind that while I'm putting this one at first because of how much it improves the character, it's not as nearly as transcendent as Winter Soldier's uniform, which thrust him into the spotlight for both PvE and PvP. I don't think this is going to be the case for War Machine, and so if you value PvP, this uniform definitely drops a few spots down from number 1, but if you like PvE and you want War Machine to just shred everything in Shadowlands, shred World Boss Ultimate, he's going to be able to do that. Still a little bit on the fragile side. Would have liked to see a skill with immunity or invincibility or some kind of heal. He does have the guard hit, the 8 for 8 seconds, but that with the iframes is just enough. I think he could use a little bit more, but my best example of it would be that he's a much more powerful version of Punisher's War Machine uniform. So if you like this one, if you think that it was a worthwhile transaction or purchase, I would say that this one's probably about 1.5 times better than the Punisher uniform, and that's only at normal. I've heard the results of having it at Mythic, and they're pretty epic. So let me know what you guys think of the list, of the ranking. Let me know what you think of the uniforms as well, and which ones you're purchasing or not, or kind of on the fence about. Subscribe if you enjoyed the content and you want to support me. Hit the bell if you don't want to miss any of my content, and of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.